on the dais. I have only about 1.5 hours to cover a very interesting topic that every one of us is going to face in the coming 1 year. And since we are very short on time, I am planning to go directly into the topic, and we will have a discussion afterwards on the other things. Now, before going into the topic, I would just start with 3 points. One, we are going to look into the procedural issues and other applicable rules and the legal implications of what is being written about in assessments. We are not going to discuss on the merits of the case on a fact-to-fact basis. So we are not here to discuss 2A versus 3B, or that person has uploaded in B2C. We are not discussing that. We all know what is going to be the answer for all those cases. We are only going to see how it is going to be relevant and how it is going to be handled in the assessment. Now, second, we are going to take assessments on a very straightforward approach, and I would say least litigative approach. I know that there will be a lot of notices, and since the law is changing, each notice under GST has multiple avenues for being challenged in a court of law. But I am going into the assumption that we want a harmonious interpretation of what the courts will say when they analyze the various notifications, the circulars, the rules, and the act. And we are proceeding with the stance that what is being written in the law is procedurally and legally correct. And third, I believe we are all on the same page that we are first focusing on what do you mean by assessment per se in the context of section 61, 62, 63, 64, and ultimately leading to a demand and recovery under 73, 74 and read with 78, 79. So we all know that the end result for the government to start any form of assessment is to reach the actual liability that has been short paid or which can be erroneously refunded to you, or an ITC wrongly claimed or wrongly availed, which they need back. So that is the ultimate objective of the government, which they ultimately want to recover with interest, and possibly if there are any penalties to be levied, they will also levy a penalty. But our focus is not on what is to be levied. We are going to focus on how the process of getting to that magical figure of what is a liability that they are going to arrive at is. So let us start with the very core concept of what an assessment in GST is. I would like to share my screen. Those who have the GST Acts with you, I would always prefer you having the GST Act with you so that you can mark or you can make annotations whenever required in case of certain points that we need to be always aware of. So I will start with assessment. The definition, Satyanarayan sir has already quoted the definition verbatim. Is the screen visible? Now, the host has disabled the screen sharing, and so if it can be enabled for me, it will be very helpful.
Anil sir.
Yes, sir.
Make him a co-host.
Sir, you will be a co-host, sir. You can do.
I am getting a pop-up window host.
Yeah, yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I believe the screen is visible.
Yeah.
Let us look at the definition of what an assessment is under GST. In GST, we have section 211, which defines an assessment to mean a determination of tax liability. So ultimately, first and foremost, we need to understand that the assessment is nothing but a determination of tax liability. So even though the core concept of an assessment is restricted to section 59 to 64, that is starting from self-assessment to a provisional assessment, we need to also keep in mind that 73 and 74 also ultimately determines a tax liability. And we can say that the principles of a general assessment, which are captured in 75, can to some extent be adopted for the purpose of these provisions. Now, I am skipping 59 altogether. because we all know that self-assessment is very simple. We have to truly and correctly declare our taxable supplies, the liability that we have arrived at, the correct ITC that is available, and other details in the monthly return in form GSTR 3B. Whether or not GSTR 3B is a return under Section 39 is a big question that is yet to be answered. The government has made its stance very clear and said that they have retrospectively amended Rule 61.5, and 3B is the return that we have as the monthly return. So the SLP before that case, in the case of Gujarat High Court versus AAP and company, is pending before the Supreme Court. But let us assume that GSTR 3B is actually the return under Section 39 for all purposes. And we will go ahead with saying that once you file the 3B, your self-assessment is done. Now, self-assessment is very important on account of two reasons. One, the entire GST law has been given off or structured in a way that there will be maximum thrust on you to do your self-assessment correctly. So I would say that the more you make an effort into doing your self-assessment correctly, the less you will face the rest of the assessment provisions or the demand and recovery provisions. So the onus is always on the taxpayer to get his facts correctly, assess his liability correctly, and pay off in the accurate form and manner. So I'm not going to focus on self-assessment. We all know the nitty-gritties of filing a return correctly, whether it is practical or not, but let us leave altogether that. We will first look into Section 61. Section 61, as you may all know, is a section that empowers the popular ASMT 10 notices that everybody is nowadays getting. Now, Section 61 is called scrutiny of returns. Now, while the lawmaker wrote Section 61, the Section 61 was theoretically a section that would be scrutinizing a well-formed return in GSTR 3, which had an inbuilt matching and reconciliation method through Section 42, 43, the MIS 01, MIS 02 forms, and the return data that has been fed into the GSTR 3 was much more refined than what we are getting in GSTR 3B. So we should know that Section 61, when it talked about discrepancy, was probably looking into finer points of discrepancies which could creep out from a well-formed GSTR 3. But as we said earlier, we have to live with what the technology of our times have limited us to. That is our GSTR 3B. So we know that the scope of a discrepancy that may appear to the officer while scrutinizing a 3B is much higher than the finished product being a GSTR 3. There is nothing we can do about it because GSTR 3B is for all purposes our monthly return. So we have to live with the fact that GSTR 3B will be scrutinized by the officer because it is a return, and probably any other return that Section 61 authorizes him to. So what can be scrutinized, when it is to be scrutinized, who can scrutinize it, all form part of the procedural issues that form the crux of Section 61. Let us have a look at Section 61. It says the proper officer may scrutinize the return and related particulars furnished by the registered person to verify the correctness of the return and inform him of the discrepancies noticed and seek the explanation thereto. Very simple. Now, in this simplicity, there are certain small catches that we need to be very aware of. One, we need to know who our proper officer is. Can an intelligence officer come forward and issue an ASMT 10? They may very well say he is also a proper officer, he can do it. But going by what Canon India has said, the and A are two things. We need to say the proper officer means the proper officer who under our registration is our jurisdictional officer. So we can very well expect a scrutiny of return to be conducted by our jurisdictional officer. And that too, the department knows that they are understaffed. They don't have enough faculty of people to process each and every return that has been submitted through the electronic common portal. That is why the Act also clearly says that the proper officers may scrutinize. If you look at the GST Council minutes, the initial 10th, 11th, and 12th meeting minutes, you will find out that there was a big discussion on 61 by the Council of Ministers forming part of the Committee on 61. Since we are representing the South Zone, I like to add that the Tamil Nadu minister at that point of time wanted this may to be replaced by shall. He wanted 100% scrutiny of all returns, but thank God we are left with a may. So there is no legal mandate on the department or the officer to scrutinize each and every return that has been submitted to the through the common portal. So it is properly a choice that he can exercise depending on the volume and the gravity of the discrepancies that is coming up. Now, what is being scrutinized? He's scrutinizing the return. Now, what do you mean by a return? A return itself is something that we have to look into in depth. We know that there is a history behind return. So return can be defined also. So return is defined in GST Act. It includes a return in section 39. That means our present 3B, ignoring the fact of 3B, 3 is the proper return that was originally intended. The return can be an annual return in form number 9. It can be a final return. All those things can be actually scrutinized by the proper officer. Now, the catch is this. It asks the officer to verify the return, scrutinize the return, and the related particulars furnished by the taxable registered person. Now, what do you mean by related particulars furnished by the registered person? Now, when I file a 3B, I have some data that I have to feed in. When I file a GSTR1, is GSTR1 a return? If you look at the actual rule regarding GSTR1, you can only call it a statement of outward supplies and may not fall within the definition of the term return. So GSTR1 is something that cannot be called as a return and need not be scrutinized under section 61. Now, we are only filing the GSTR3B and the GSTR1. And ultimately, if you are crossing a certain threshold, you are also filing an annual return in form number 9. Now, you can also scrutinize this form number 9. Now, in this, apart from the 3B and apart from the GSTR1, the data that's also being generated and which is being also available to the proper officer pertaining to each registered possessee is the GSTR 2A details, as well as the GSTR 2A detail that has been captured into table number 8A of the annual return. Now, there is a question whether scrutiny can, as part of the general scrutiny, include the comparison of your 2A figures as a discrepancy in the return. Now, strictly speaking, if you look at section 61, the proper officer is only supposed to scrutinize the return and related particulars furnished by the registered person. So when you are looking at the registered person per se, he is furnishing only his outward supplies and his data in his 3B. The other person's GSTR1 data are collated by GSTN into the GSTR2A, and these are not furnished by the registered person. If you look at GSTR2A, it is actually nothing but an auto-drafted statement of inward supplies. So you cannot call it a return, neither is it a related particulars furnished by the registered person. So technically, you can very well argue that the comparison of GSTR2A with GSTR3B or the table 8A with table 8 or table 6 in your annual return is something that is within the jurisdiction of the proper officer under section 61 to even scrutinize. Now, if this is the way forward, we will have to end up challenging each and every ASMT 10s involved. But at the same time, the department has taken a view that once you file the annual return, the data of 2A is captured in that. You have also accepted the differences in table 8D. You have broken it down into table 8E and table 8F. So once you have accepted that and filed the return, this data forms part of the return that has been furnished by the taxable registered person and is thus now being eligible to be scrutinized by the proper officer. So two views, you can challenge an ASMT 10 simply on this ground that the 2A does not pertain to related particulars furnished by me. But at the end of the day, I believe that a harmonious interpretation we need to put forward is that once we accept a difference in table 8D and we know the breakup of the table 8D figures in the annual return, we have to live with the fact that we are supposed to give a proper, true and fair reconciliation of what was to be missed or omitted and why it is being omitted. Now, in parallel to section 61, we have a rule 99. How the proper officer will communicate this discrepancy to you? That is done through ASMT 10. ASMT 10 per se is not a show cause notice. It is only a notice intimating certain discrepancies to you. And the key word that we have to focus is that the act uses discrepancy and not defect. While it uses the word discrepancy, the officer gets the freedom to ask for anything that, according to his intelligent application of mind, is something that is not reconciling or something that is off. It need not be a violation of a law. It need not be a defect. It need not be a mistake. Anything that should have been tallied but not tallied, or anything which should not have been your case, is now popping up as a discrepancy, can be looked upon as a discrepancy within the meaning of section 61, and he can communicate to it. Now, what do you mean by a discrepancy? The classic example I can give you is, as earlier, 2A versus 3B. Apart from the challenge whether 2A is something that we have filed, let us simply say 2A versus 3B. Let us assume that the government will allow all invoices for which we have proved as eligible ITC. And we know that each ITC we have claimed is correct. We have not violated any law. The other person has paid but only mismatched this GSTR 1. Is it still a discrepancy? Have we violated any provisions of section 16(2)(c)? Now, your answer or your facts may be valid. You are fully right in claiming that your ITC was eligible. But as far as a proper officer is concerned, there has been a mismatch that is apparent on the face of the scrutiny form. That is the return in annual 3B or the annual return in table 8. So he is well within his rights to ask the explanation as to why there is this discrepancy. And you can very well provide him the reasoning that these and these are the reconciliation statements involved, which explain the discrepancy that have been communicated to you. Now, if I want to make a communication back to the officer that this is the explanation for the discrepancy, I will do so in form number ASMT 11. Now, ASMT 11 is a very simple reply. You can file online saying that I have received your ASMT 10 wherein you have called this much discrepancies. I believe that these are my explanations for the discrepancies, which will very well explain the discrepancy. If the officer accepts your discrepancy, that scenario is section 61, subsection 3. If the officer accepts your discrepancy, he will issue an order in form ASMT 12, stating that your discrepancy has been accepted, your explanation is accepted, and we are not intending to proceed further. However, if no reply in ASMT 11 is submitted to the proper officer within 30 days, or such additional time as he may give, because obviously there is a requirement to give additional time as permitted in the act itself. If you are not given enough time, you can ask for it. They will give you time. You can give the explanation thereto after that subsequent extension of time period. And if you are failing to do the explanation in ASMT 11 even after that extended period of time, or if you have submitted certain explanations, but you have submitted the explanations which are not to the satisfaction of the officer is at a crossroads. 61 then asks the officer to do one of 5 things. He can direct that the file be taken up for an audit under section 65. Perhaps the material discrepancy has been noticed, huge ITC difference, huge outward supplied variations, rate of tax supposed to maybe or may not be correct. A lot of discrepancies are there. He can direct that the file may be taken up for audit under section 65. Or it appears that from the account submitted as part of ASMT 11, it is a very complex case. He can ask that the file be taken up for section 66, special audit by a chartered accountant. Or worst case, the officer is of the opinion that this fellow is a very devious person and there has to be a very quick response and a quick action on the side of the department, and he may refer the file to be to be a case for a inspection under section 67 after due approvals from the Joint Commissioner. Or he himself can take action. The proper officer himself can then proceed to determine the liabilities, that is the tax and other dues, under section 73 or section 74. So 61 is only giving the start of any assessment procedure. Any assessment order that you get under section 61 is always a favorable order, because ASMT 12 is the closure of a discrepancy initiation notice. Once your answer to your discrepancy is not satisfactory, or you don't have anything to say, 61 will not result in an assessment order against you, wherein you have a tax liability to be paid. Now, what do you mean by the proper officer's choice in section 61? Audit, special audit, inspection, or 73 and 74, which we know are the most probable results after a 61 in case your explanation is not found satisfactory. That is the general structure of section 61. Now let us look into the corresponding rules and the corresponding forms. Now, let us see what are the industry practices when it comes to discrepancies identified by the proper officer. It can be a difference between GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B. We very well know that the explanation to section 7512 is not the explanation. The provisions of section 7512 has been amended in the last Finance Act, but it is yet to be notified. So there is no RR directly possible if the value in GSTR 1 is higher than the value in GSTR 3B. But ultimately, what happens is that the tax department knows that there is something going on if your values in GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B are incorrect. There could be two reasons for this. One, there has been a shortfall in tax paid in 3B, or two, there has been a mistake in uploading data in GSTR 1 resulting in a higher figure in 3B. Both of these could have been corrected by you subsequent to filing an annual return, because the annual return in form GSTR 9 empowered you to correct your mistakes. But having said so, since there is a discrepancy between your 3B and your 1, since related particulars in Rule 99 also captures the data that is relevant to the annual return, which is also your GSTR 1, the officer can simply ask what is the reason between the difference in GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B. We already talked about GSTR 2A, 3B differences, table 8D of GSTR 9. There are two schools of thought on this. You can challenge it. You can say that it is not something that has been furnished by me, but probably the department will take a stance that you have accepted it in your annual return. So it is onus is on you to explain. Now, belated returns of being filed. Your returns are matching. There is no ITC difference. There is no output tax difference. But your returns are filed with a delay. And the interest column that you have submitted in GSTR 3B is nil, because it does not automatically calculate interest. This itself is a discrepancy for which they can issue a notice in ASMT 10. Now, one of the interesting arguments many persons have come forward in section 73 and 74 is that if there is no tax shortfall, but there is only a delay in filing of returns and there is only an interest that is to be paid, no show cause notice can be issued under section 73 or 74, because both the sections use tax as well as interest that has to be paid. So there is a school of thought that you cannot use 73 and 74 as a method for initiating a show cause notice for recovery of interest. However, 61 gives the power to the officer to first identify that as a discrepancy in ASMT 10. And once there is no satisfactory explanation, use section 61(3) as a resort for proceeding under 73 or 74 to recover tax as well as other dues. In this other dues, he can capture interest as well as any late fee or any other amounts that is legally liable to be paid to the government. Now, another interesting thing that we are seeing in a lot of discrepancy notices is percentage of credit availment for utilizing your output liability is much higher than the percentage that you have used for liability using cash. So you might be in a sector where 99% of your credit is of your total liability is met through credit and only 1% is made through cash. We all know that the provisions of Rule 86B came much later, stating that subject to certain conditions, you have to pay a minimum of something amount as cash. But even for the prior period, you are getting notices saying that in ASMT 10, you're saying that the cash payment is very low and the amount of credit that is coming forward is very high. Whether this is correct or not, personally, in my opinion, the officer may be well in his rights to ask why there is a higher involvement of credit in consideration of the data that you are filing in GSTR1, because you are providing the statistical analysis for them. You are showing them what are the goods and services you are providing, and the data capturing of the goods and services now identifies which sector in which you operate in. And the department has a rather well formed database of what are the general trends in the industry of the percentage of credit availability for each sector. And if it is much higher than that, he may be in his rights to call for it as a discrepancy. I am saying maybe because personally the discrepancy should arise fully from the return, but the department is taking a very broad approach and saying that the credit availment is higher based on their industry standard review also. Now, this is a simple questioning the discrepancy for which you can very well say that I have higher credit utilization and all my credits are valid. You can simply prove your stocks availability in hand or the nature of the products. Maybe you'll be getting financial credit notes through which the margin is passed on, and simply close the matter thereon. The provisions of Rule 86B cannot be retrospectively implemented, and this ASMT 10 cannot lead ultimately into a 73 and 74 to impose any minimum percentage of cash remittance. The department simply wants to know whether things are going on correctly. Then another discrepancy that we are generally seeing based on the system generated data notices are difference in rate of tax. The system captures the inward supply products of various suppliers as well as your output HSN codes. Now, you might be in a sector where all your inputs are at 12% and all your output taxable commodities are at 5%. Maybe you're a manufacturer. But from an assessing officer's point of view, he does not know that you are a manufacturer, and the HSN codes that are coming in and coming out are significantly different, and for which he can call it as a discrepancy, whether you are classifying the product correctly, whether you are actually having an inverted duty structure for which you are supposed to give a refund. Again, it is a discrepancy falling only from your returns, which he is well within his rights to ask for. You can simply file a statement saying that these are our facts. You can give the explanation thereto and close the matter altogether. Significant variation on month-to-month supplies. Month 1, you filed a turnover of 1 crore. Month 2, you file a turnover of 10,000 rupees. Month 3, again back 1 crore. Month 4, again back 10,000 rupees. So huge fluctuations in your business, even though the sector in which you are operating in is not in a lockdown scenario. This is per se not something that the officer can call as a discrepancy only from the returns and can only be taken from external sources also. This is something that the officer should not use as a discrepancy for invocation of Section 61, but it has been seen that they are also doing it. Again, the answer is simple. File your explanation as to why the variations are happening, and the ASMT 12 will be well within his rights to issue. Now, the major component of ASMT 10s, which are ultra via Section 61, is the usage of audited financial statements. Certain tax authorities are calling for books of accounts along with ASMT 10s and then using the books of accounts, saying that there is a significant variation between your return and your books of accounts and issuing ASMT 10s. Now, that is, in my opinion, wrong, because as far as the scrutiny of returns is concerned, it is only limited to the facts and figures available in the return. And there cannot be any comparison of data which is available in any financial statements or third-party intelligence reports or third-party data. So such things will take that action of the officer purely out of scope of 61. And if there is such a section 61 ASMT 10 received by you, you are well within your rights to challenge it and saying that it is out of bounds. It is not a discrepancy for which you are having any authority to call for. That is section 61, more or less a section, very simple section. And I would advise everybody who is in receipt of ASMT 10s to see it as a very good opportunity, because unlike the shockos notices or the intimation under DRC 1A in 73 or 74, 61 is the only provision in GST Act where you are given a intimation of all the primary discrepancies the officer has analyzed, for which you can give a proper reply and close the matter then and there. Only if you fail to do this will all the other provisions will start to attract. The officer may directly go to 73 and 74, that is his discretion. But since most of the state authorities are using section 61 as the starting point of looking at the returns, I would advise everybody who's into practice to use section 61, see section 61 in a good light and use this opportunity to clear the maximum discrepancies that in your opinion are well explainable, and in case the 61 as discrepancies also identify actual issues which you might have missed out while filing the annual return, cure it at that stage itself with payment of tax and interest. Of course, ITC difference on all you can challenge, but since we are first looking into the 17-18 ASMT 10s in this period, many of us would have made a lot of mistakes while filing the returns in the initial periods, all of which are now being communicated back to you through the usage of ASMT 10s. So see section 61 as a golden opportunity to get a snapshot of what the discrepancies available with the department are and close it with the least damages possible. And there will be no requirement to go to the shock cause notices or any litigation under section 73 and section 74. So section 61 presents a golden opportunity. I would advise never litigate 61. Identify the discrepancy, close it off. Any mistakes that you are having, make a full and fair disclosure in ASMT 11, and it will always help you in case the matter goes up front and the department initiates a shock cause notice under 73 and 74. Now, that is section 61 regarding scrutiny of returns. The fundamental point under section 61 that we closed is that the only order that you are going to get in section 61 is a favorable order under ASMT 12. If things are going bad, please know that it will go under 65, 60, 67, 73 or 74. So 61 is a very good section as far as we are concerned, because the order that we are going to get in ASMT 12 is a favorable order concluding the proceedings. Now, just opposite section 61, we have section 62. The only order that you are going to get in section 62 is an unfavorable order. So that is the attitude we have to take while looking into section 62. Now, let us look at section 62, assessment of non-filers. Now, we all know that India is a very tax-friendly country or tax-compliant country. I do not know. You all know the answer to that. The percentage of persons who file taxes on a regular basis since 2017, if you look at it statistically, is very minimal. Everybody has a habit of habitually defaulting. So the legislature knew this upfront. They introduced a section called section 62 for poking and prodding the assessees to file their returns. So please make sure that 62 is something that you are well thorough with, because we know that we are living with a lot of persons who are hit under the corona pandemic and are forced to be a return defaulter. And those who are return defaulters are under the watch, and the hanging sword of section 62 is on their head. So we need to understand what are the problems and intricacies section 62 presents itself with. Now, even though 62 was designed as something to poke and prod the assessee to file the return, it may very well end up being a very damaging section if appropriate steps are not taken. Now, what are the damages that assessee can get if you don't look at section 62 correctly? Let us have a look at section 62. Notwithstanding anything to the contrary in section 73 and 74. So we know that 73 and 74 are the general provisions for demanding the tax or the erroneous refund or the wrongly or erroneously availed ITC or utilized ITC. So 62 now seeks to go one step above. It does not need to follow the procedures that a tax officer needs to go through while arriving at a tax demand. 62 has a shortcut method, if one may say so. If the registered person fails to file the return under 39 or 45, that is your monthly return or your final return, even after the service of a notice under 46. What is a notice under 46? It is none other than GSTR 3A. The proper officer may proceed to assess the tax liability to the best of his judgment. We all know that the best of the judgment of the tax officer will be the worst of the judgment as far as the assessee is concerned, taking into account all the relevant material which is available to the tax officer within a period of 5 years from the date specified under section 44, filing the annual return for that financial year. So 62(1) is a very simple provision. It says you are supposed to file a return. You have defaulted in filing that return. Once you make a default in filing the return, there is a right that accrues to you. What is that right that accrues to you? As per section 46, every return defaulter has to be served with a notice first in GSTR 3A. So you cannot, the tax officer cannot skip that part. He has to first serve a notice in 3A, and the 3A will invariably read as follows. You have failed to file your monthly return in form 3B for the month of XXX. You are supposed to file your return within 15 days of this notice, or proceedings under section 62 to assess the tax liability to the best of our judgment will be initiated against you. Now the 3A is served on you. You have not filed the return. Here, the proper officer starts to work. We have a circular by the CBIC on how the proper officer is supposed to take that best judgment assessment. It is circular number 129. As per the said circular, the proper officer has many tools at his disposal. He can take the data which is available in GSTR 1. He can take the data which is available in GSTR 2A. He can take the data as per e-way bill. He can take any other data that he has, which he feels is relevant to assessing the turnover and tax liability of the assessee. And then using all these facts, arrive at the tax liability. Now, please make sure that you don't miss this word in section 62. Issue an assessment order within a period of 5 years. So the first thing that you are going to see in section 62 is the assessment order in form ASMT 13. Unlike the counterpart in 61 or the normal tax demand process under 73 or 74, where first they will issue a shock cost notice stating that I have certain data out of this. This is the total amount of turnover I have arrived at. This is your tax liability. And if you don't reply this, I will determine this as the liability and pass an order. No, that is 73, 74, 61, or probably 63 and 64. But in 62, ASMT 13 is the order. The only notice you are going to get prior as a warning is the 3A notice, which says, please file the return in 3B. or we will take a best judgment assessment. So the first and the last time you will be seeing the liability, the value on which you are supposed to pay tax, and the tax liability that is to be paid is the order itself. There is no notice which quantifies this is the amount that you are supposed to pay. The order itself will be the liability on you under 62 if you miss out filing the 3B after receiving the 3A notice. Now, since it is an order, what is the logical next step? Generally, it is in any tax proceedings for the matter. First, there is a show cause notice for X quantity. We will file a reply. The assessment order will consider our reply, arrive at say Y or X as the case may be. Then the order is passed and we have a decision. Apply for a rectification, apply for an appeal, or directly move court if there is a violation of the principles of natural justice while framing the order. But in 62, you're skipping the show cause notice part and the quantification, the notice part altogether, and directly reaching the assessment. So the only logical way forward is a filing of a statutory appeal. But the government, the legislature knew that that is not the right way intended. So as a safeguard mechanism, as an inbuilt code, they have included 62(2), which says that if within 30 days of the assessment order in form ASMT 13, if the registered person files a valid return in 3B, then the assessment order is deemed to be withdrawn, subject to the liability under section 51 for interest and any applicable late fee for the filing of the 3B. So you have missed out, say on April 1st, you had to April to April 30th is the tax period of April. You are supposed to file generally May 20th. You did not do so. On June 1st, you got a 3A notice saying that within 15 days you are supposed to file. Within 15 days you didn't file. So on June 16th, the assessment order in ASMT 13 is served to you. Let us take a theoretical example. Forget about the extension by up till June 30th, forget about that. But let us assume on June 15th, the assessment order is given. You have till July 14th, that is 30 days, to file that April month's 3B. It can be a wrong return, but get it filed. Once it is filed and it is within 30 days of the ASMT 13, the assessment that has been done using the best judgment methodologies covered under Circular 129 is automatically deemed to be withdrawn. There is nothing the officer has to do about it. You have followed, you are coming back into track. This is why I said 62 is nothing but a poking and prodding mechanism inbuilt into the act to push assessees into filing a return. Because let us say you are an assessee with a turnover of 1 lakh rupee. You have a monthly liability of 18,000 and no ITC is available to you. You have filed to file a return. The officer will say your liability could have been growing to 1,50,000, even though it was actually nil in the next month. He will pass an order saying that your liability is for turnover 1.5 lakhs. Your liability tax demand is 27,000 rupees. Immediately seeing this, okay, you will face the heat. You will file within 30 days your actual 3B and the government gets the money. So that is the core design of Section 62, to push the assessees into filing the return. Now, that is the theory. Now, let us see what happens practically. What if you don't file the return within 30 days of the ASMT 13? If you file it on the 31st day, or if you don't file the return after 30 days at all, what next? Can you say that the at any point of time, once I file the 3B, the assessment order is no longer required? I have correctly declared everything as per our books of accounts. This assessment order was a best judgment assessment order, and this need not be followed in future. No. The Honorable Kerala High Court, in the case of Bridge Hygiene Services, said that the court cannot even grant a 1 more day delay after the mandatory statutory period given under Section 62(2). So even if you miss that deadline of 30 days by 1 day, the only recourse available to you is filing an appeal under 107 against the ASMT 13. Now, what do you mean by filing an appeal? You have to pay 10% of the best judge tax under protest, not under protest as the minimum pre-deposit. and then get the appeal heard saying that I have filed my return, this was best judgment, get it back. So again, your working capital will get stuck. So 62(2) is very dangerous. Now, okay, you have not filed at all. You have forgotten to file the appeals within 90 days. The 30-day condonable delay is also there. Forget the fact that there is a extension of limitation as per the Honorable Supreme Court's order. Your entire demand will be confirmed and there will be no savings available to you. That liability is final. Not even Supreme Court can save you. That is the danger of Section 62. Thankfully for us now, because of the corona conditions, we have that blanket extension from 15th March 2020 till now. Still the further orders from the apex court is coming. So till that time, even after that 128th day has crossed from the ASMT 13, if you have not filed an appeal, you can very well file an appeal, pay 10% and say that we are contesting the best judgment assessment by the proper officer. Now, what about those cases where even the expired period was prior to the Supreme Court's order? That is a very strange issue that we have to be very well aware of. We all know that we have an amnesty scheme going on, right? What is the amnesty scheme? Any persons who have defaulted filing returns in 3B from July 2017 to March 2021, I guess, right, can pay a very nominal late fee and become a compliant assessee. So everybody was making a huge hue and cry. Okay, you have given us waiver of late fee, but even then, if I file the return using ITC, the provisions of Section 16(4) will hit. I also need my ITC back. That was the first contention that everybody raised. Contention number 2, a lot of persons got cancelled their registration. Time for revocation is also over under Section 30. I want to first get my number back and then I want to comply with the amnesty provisions and then file the returns and become a good assessee. That were the primary 2 contentions regarding the amnesty scheme. Now, we have to think about the third possibility. In all these return defaulter cases where long pending returns were there, the department could very well have served 3A notices in 2017, 18 or 19 or 20. In all those cases, they could have done a best judgment assessment under Section 62, issued ASMT 13 as well as DRC 07 summary form. Now, in those cases, even if you file the returns within the frame provided, that is up to August 31st, under the new amnesty scheme, and you file all your 3Bs exactly as per your books of accounts, 3B1, everything is matching, your P&L will tally, everything is correct. Even if you file all those satisfying the amnesty scheme clause from July 17 to March and become a regular good assessee, any completed assessment under Section 62 is final. And the only way forward to get that 62 over your head is filing an appeal, presuming it is within the condonable period of additional 30 days or falling within the blanket extension after 15th March 2020 as per the Supreme Court. Any liability prior to that is final and you may be in a position to, you may be stuck in a position to pay that liability. So that is the danger of ASMT 13. Now, there are a couple of decisions that we need to be aware of for ASMT 13. This is apex court decision in the case of CST versus HM Esufali case. Everybody knows this case. We are all tax practitioners. We know this case for long because this has been the go-to case the department uses for framing an assessment order anytime it uses any third-party data or anytime it completes a best judgment assessment from way back in sales tax period. As per the ratio of this Esufali case, the apex court said that a best judgment assessment can be a reasonable assessment order. So as long as the logical, straightforward approach has been taken by the proper officer and he has overall gotten the case right and the facts and figures correct, and it is reasonable and logical, it need not be perfect. It need not match your exact books of accounts. It can go ahead, a bit ahead, it can be a bit lower. But as long as a procedure adopted in arriving at that best judgment is correct, then even though it is not the actual tax liability involved underlying the transaction that you have actually done, that best judgment is accurate, and legal. Suppose I'll drive the point home. You are a person who did a turnover of 1 lakh rupee. You have defaulted afterwards. So looking into your two-way data, your GSTR, e-way bills, etc., the officer frames a best judgment assessment order for the period subsequent to July, that is, say, August to March, saying that you could have had a monthly turnover of 1,10,000 rupees every month based on your e-way bill data and two-way, which seemingly was on the same volume as your July period, of 1,10,000 each, and arrived at a turnover of 10 lakhs for that year. If you had actually filed the return, you have actually produced your books, your assessing assessable taxable supply. The very taxable event supply was only perhaps, say, for 8 lakhs or 7 lakhs. So the demand has now been created for an amount which is higher than the actual underlying taxable supply. So the natural question one may get is this correct? Is this valid? That is where Esufali comes into play, which says the methodology by the assessing officer to determine the tax liability is sound, is logical and correct based on the available data. So it need not be the exact actual value that you have actually done during the year. The onus was on you to prove otherwise. The assessing officer did his part. If you want to challenge it, go ahead and prove it, or file the return. You should have filed the return correctly. So you might end up with a liability far higher, because we all know the tax officers are afraid of only two things. One, AG. Two, God. Nobody else they are afraid of. So they are afraid of AG, because AG will say, you could have assessed this much turnover, you have only assessed this much turnover, why shortfall? So they don't want to end up in that trap. So whenever the officer does a best judgment, it will be slightly high-pitched to protect their interests. So you might be having a case where your tax liability is much higher than what you have actually supplied in a year. But that is, the onus is on you to prove otherwise. You have to either challenge the order saying that there was no logical or reasonable nexus in arriving at the best judgment, or it is on you to file the returns correctly and get the order quashed after saying that your returns are accepted and the appeal is now granted. So that is Esufali case, which is very relevant. Simply challenging the assessment order, saying that it is purely wild imagination of the assessing officer may not work in every scenario, unless it is a case of pure imagination. Now, one recent Kerala High Court decision I would like to bring to your notice is Grow Health and Beauty Services versus State of Kerala. It's a very, very interesting decision. I would like those who are stuck in section 62 for the period prior to March 2020 to be aware of this decision. Any person who is stuck with a 62 assessment for which the return default continues can still file an appeal after March, because of the Apex Court decision extending the limitation period. But for all those persons here who are stuck with assessment ASMT 13 and DRC 7 for a period for which the appeal time limit is over, way before the extension of limitation by March 2020 has come, there is an additional window of a slight opportunity given by this decision. Now, in this case, what happened is that there was a return defaulter. The proper officer, his jurisdictional officer, concluded best judgment assessment for the entire 2 years. Subsequently, the intelligence people also raided this fellow, and without knowing that best judgment was done by the jurisdictional officer. And the intelligence people, what they did is they took the entire data based on his accounts and they passed an order under section 74. Now, for the same period, 1819, 1718, and 1920, the applicant, that is Messrs. Grow Health, was having a 62 demand order as well as a 74 demand. Now, they went to court saying that there is a best judgment assessment purely based on the estimation of the proper officer being the jurisdictional officer, as well as a book fact-based, evidence-based actual assessment determined by the intelligence assessing officers. Now, the High Court said that once there is a assessment order based on the books of accounts under section 74, the earlier best judgment assessment will be automatically abated and are required to be set aside, and only the new assessment orders under section 74 will remain. So all those persons who are having no other opportunity now That is, you don't have, we know that as per Singh Enterprises versus Central CCE, as per Supreme Court, the 30-day time window for getting a condemnation for first appeals is mandatory. So after 120th day, there is no condemnation by the first appellate authority. And if it is falling before 15th March, if it is after 15th March, the apex court decision for corona will apply, you can get a condemnation. But if that also is over prior to 15th March, the way forward in getting out of the trap that was created by 62, that is the DRC 7 that is already generated for any prior period, 17, 18 or 19, for which we are now getting the amnesty scheme, that could be through this. Get an assessment order for that period, 17, 18, 19, 19, 20, by that proper officer or any intelligence persons under section 74 based on the actual books of accounts, and then move the court saying that there is an actual assessment order being framed. Now the best turnover under 62 needs to be set aside. So even without going to the appellate authority or going to any additional pre-deposit for appeals, you can get rid of the ghost, that is section 62, if a subsequent 74 order is passed against you for that same period. Now let us move on to section 63. Now 62 is talking about non-filers of returns. 63 wants persons who are not even registered under the Act. We all know that there is a definition for taxable person. Taxable person means a person who is registered or liable to be registered under the GST Act. We all know that the charging section 9(1) links the liability to the taxable person. So even if you are liable to take registration, but you have not done so, the liability under 9(1) is hanging over your head. So how to tackle these fellows who are not taking registration and not even paying the taxes due? For that, they created 63. 63 says that, notwithstanding anything to the contrary in 73 or 74, a person who fails to obtain a registration, that is your unregistered, unaccounted persons who do business without any worry about GST law, or who wrongly cancelled that registration under 29(2). That is, the officer cancelled his registration. He kept quiet that his business is going on. He's still doing business and his turnover is more than 40 lakhs or 20 lakhs as the case may be. Those people. In these two cases, there is no return to be scrutinized. There is no notice to be given to them to file a return. So 61 and 62 cannot operate. What the officer can take is, first check whether they are actually taxable persons, arrive at whether they are actually liable to pay tax, and then demand the tax. That is the objective of the government. For that, they've said that there has to be a notice first given to the alleged taxable person. The notice will be in form ASMT 14, which will read as follows. You are a person who are doing this. This is apply. You are a taxable person within the meaning of section 2 read with section 22. You should have taken registration. You have not done so. So you have liability to pay. Please pay this much. These are the evidences I have against you. So the officer will use the evidence which he has in his possession, which identified that person as a taxable person, and using that arrive at his actual liability. Using the best judgment methodologies, we can use the same principles of Circular 129 regarding 162 for this section 63 also, and arrive at the liability. But unlike 62, instead of giving a order upfront, the principles of natural justice will not be followed if that is happening. So the 63 automatically gave a proviso stating that you have to give an opportunity to the other person to give his statement of facts. So the notice will be given first in ASMT 14. And once the ASMT 14 is given, you have to file a reply in ASMT 15. Sorry, in the applicable form. And if it is confirmed, it will be confirmed in ASMT 15. Now, very simple section. You are not registered. Please register, pay tax. You have not done so. This is the show cause notice. You will file a reply, get it closed. Very straightforward section. But there are certain intricacies in 63. Now, assuming that the proper officer has evidence regarding certain short payments which are done by you and you have not taken registration. And also stating the fact that this is a non-obstante provision which overrides 73 and 74. Can the officer invoke 63 on an unregistered person, or should he invoke 74 for an unregistered person? So there are two possibilities which are open to the officer. He may do it under 74 if the evidences are such that the tax liability can be arrived at exactly based on that evidence, or he may choose 63, where he will go one step forward and assess the turnover in totality and then go under 63 assessment. So there are two options on how to tackle a unregistered person available to the government. Now, just look at the strangeness involved. If it is a case of 74, you are supposed to take registration, but you have not taken registration. Where have we seen these words before? Failure to obtain a registration, failure to suppression of turnover, failure to pay tax. All these are offenses which are available in section 122. So we know that failure to take registration is an offense. So wherever there is a willing or actually known failure to take registration and not pay the tax, obviously there will be mens rea involved, and the officer will be very well in his powers to invoke 74 and tax that person. But please compare 74 read with 63. In 63, there are no inbuilt penal provisions, whereas in 74, even the very initial penalty 74.5, if everything is closed at the first instance, is 15%, and if moves or to a shock cause notice 25 and order 50, or at the max 100%. So 63 per se does not have a penalty, maybe probably because it is assessing a best judge turnover and not the exact turnover per se. But at the same time, we need to be aware that 63 read with 74 gives a huge difference in terms of penalty. Also, if it is a fit case for mens rea, the officer has an additional option under section 127 to additionally invoke 122 proceedings along with 63. If it is a fit case where there is offense being done by the taxable person willingly. So just now compare 63 plus 122 read with 74 with 122. So 63 plus 127 plus 122 and 74 read with 122 will give you two different conclusions altogether. Why? If you are a willing defaulter and the officer has proof that you are a willing defaulter under section 63, he will issue 63 with 122 through 127. And the penalty under 122 is equivalent to the tax involved. So equal tax always if you are a taxable person who fails to take registration and the officer chooses to go the way forward under 63. There is an inherent the proper officer may invoke penalty under 127, that is 122. But if he does it, then the penal consequences of 63 will be far higher than the penal consequences of 74. Because in 74, if you are caught, the taxable person can accept his problems and pay the tax, interest and 15% penalty in the very first stage and conclude the proceedings then and there. So 63 read with 127 with 122 will be far more damaging than 74 read with 122, because 174 we conclude under 74.5. The provisions of section 75.13 will kick in and say that it is an offense which already being penalized under 74 and there is no requirement to be penalized again under 122. There is no such saving involved in 63 because there are no inbuilt penalty in 63, and the only penalty that can be applied to you is 122 because it is a specific offense, that is failure to obtain registration is a specific offense, and not even a general penalty of 125 can be levied upon you if you are an actual case of willful default. If it's a genuine case and some small amounts were missed and there is no mens rea involved, 127 through 127, the officer can choose not to invoke 122. But for those persons who are actually going under the radar as tax professionals, just tell them what is in store for them, show them 63 read with 127, read with 122, and what can be the consequences if they are within now the radar of the government. That is section 63 regarding unregistered persons assessments. So these are the most common 3 assessment procedures that the department will first initiate. 61 for those who scrutiny, those who have filed the return, they will scrutinize. 62, they will push a person to file the return. If they don't, the assessment order will crystallize on you. And once something is filed under 62, to comply with, we file a 3B. The officer can well come back and scrutinize the return under 61 again. Or under 63, he can go ahead and do double damage, do a best judgment assessment, invoke penalties also under 122 if it is a fit case or invocation of penalty. So these are the most common 3 provisions of assessments in GST. Now, it is not complete to have a talk on assessments without going into the provisions of section 73 and 74, because we started in 61 and we know that most of the tax demands ultimately will be through 73 or 74. Now, what are the basic issues involved in 73 and 74? Now, I see there are a lot of persons here, around 245 people here, and majority of them are, I think, from Kerala. But for my friends in the other states, if you are listening in, I want you to go and find out circular file number 1444 issued by the Kerala state government on the guidelines of how to do an assessment and demand provisions under 73 and 74, dated 21st February 2021. The Kerala government has done a proactive step in codifying the section 73 and 74 and giving a broad structure to the officers of how to do the demand under 73 and 74. So that is a very short document. I will share the document for you. We please, even if you don't read the act, please go through the guidelines issued by the state government of Kerala, which is a very sweet and very short summary of what the provisions are there for. I will share that screen. This is the file I'm talking about, 144, dated 22/2/2021. This has been issued by the SGST Department Kerala regarding the guidelines for determination of tax under 73 and 74. Now, this gives a very precise and clear instruction of how 73 and 74 operates to the officers. It's given primarily for the clarity of the department, but we also can make note of the various methodologies put across in this paper, and we can use it to understand what 73 and 74 is all about. Now, coming to 73 and 74, I will call them the twins of assessment and demand. Never study 73 or 74 alone. You have to take it together and compare, and then only you will realize how the provisions have been drafted. 73 and 74 are twin provisions. Each section in 73 will have a evil twin in 74. Now, what is the defining distinction that the government, the legislature wants us to identify when we are discussing 73 and 74? 73 talks about demands in cases other than those which involve fraud, willful misstatement, suppression of facts, etc. It is basically verbatim of what 11A or the earlier proviso to 73 in Finance Act was all about. Basically, they have captured the spirit of the earlier demand provisions in the excise and service tax laws and brought it forward into the GST Act. And 74 deals with those cases where these 3 elements are present. So we can summarize to say that mens rea is what distinguishes 73 and 74. Now, why should there be a demand by the government to the tax officer, by the proper officer to the taxpayer? It can only be 5 reasons, which are summarized as short payment of taxes, non-payment of taxes, erroneous refunds, availment of ITC wrongly, utilization of ITC wrongly. These are the 5 things where the government is at a loss, which they need to recoup by creating a demand. Now, what are the procedures involved in creating a demand? Because just like the provisions of 61, 62, and 63, there are a lot of procedures that 73 and 74 also capture, which, since we are in a procedurally driven computerized methodologies for filing the returns and getting all the related proper paperwork done, the procedures for 73 and 74 are also much important to be looked into, which we can see in Rule 142. Now, let us take all the provisions of 73 and 74 simultaneously. First, we know that there has to be a tax demand, which can be of these 5 things. Now, one thing I would like to highlight here is that there is a demand that needs to be created wherever there is a wrongful availment of ITC as well as a wrongful utilization of ITC. So even if you have not used a wrongly availed ITC for offsetting a payment that is due to you by the government, that itself is enough for the government to recover that money from you. Why you have to look into the fund flow mechanism between the states to understand that even keeping something in your credit ledger and not expensing off will have an impact on the fund flow sharing mechanism between the states. Just go through section 17 of the IGST Act and that aspect will be very clear. Now, wrongful availment of ITC and wrongful utilization of ITC. Now, here I would like to highlight para 61 of circular 125. What do you mean by availment of ITC has been captured in 61 para of 125, which means crediting the ITC into the electronic credit ledger. So if you are availing something and that is filed through the 3B or the ITC forms and getting credited to the electronic credit ledger, then only I will call it as a input credit availed. It is very relevant in the context of 16.4 primarily, but here also for the purpose of 73 and 74, once it is credited wrongly to the electronic credit ledger, the officer is well within its right to go and demand it under 73 or 74, even if you are choosing not to utilize it. Now, one of the major issues many of us are facing nowadays is department is asking for 73 and 74 provisions, by asking back wrongly availed ITC, even if you have not utilized it, along with the interest under section 50. Now, even if I have not utilized it, just keeping it in my credit ledger, can I call it something that I have used? Did I make any loss to the government? Should I be liable to pay interest? Recently, in the case of commercial steel, as well as in the case of Manasarovar Motors, the Bihar High Court, as well as the Madras High Court have held that unless you utilize that credit, you need not pay interest. So to that extent, we need to read 73 and 74 accordingly. For wrongly availed ITC, which has not been utilized, we need not pay interest under section 50. This is more or less going parallel to the scenario which was happening in Central Excise Rules 14. After Rule 14 was amended after the decision of the Apex Court in Swiss Laboratory, where they said that prior to amendment, even availing without utilization results in interest. That was the case in Central Excise till it was amended. So that post-amendment scenario is what the present courts have arrived at in the context of 73 and 74 also for wrongly availed ITC which has not been utilized. Now, you assuming that you have done any of the 5, the department needs to quantify it and issue a notice to you. But there was a problem. This communication gap, if it is under 74, will unnecessarily lead to a penalty of 25% once the show cause notice was communicated to you. So they amended Rule 142 in 2019 and inserted another form called DRC-01A. Through DRC-01A, the proper officer will communicate to the taxpayer that these are certain things that they have identified as being short paid or non-paid or availed, utilized or erroneously refunded, for which you can choose to then act on it. This will act as a buffer before the notice for you to close something under 73.5 or 74.5. So just like what I said about ASMT 10 under 61, consider DRC 1A as a golden opportunity to identify your issues which the officer has identified. And if it is an actual issue, close it then and there, so that any further proceedings into litigation can be avoided altogether. Now, whether DRC01A is online, for some strange reason, the common portal has yet to bring DRC1A into electronic form. So DRC1A can be served on you only manually. And if you have something in reply to that DRC1A, you are supposed to give it in writing in part D of that DRC1A. Please bear in mind that this was a mandatory procedure in 2019. Officer could not have gone into a shock cause notice without issuance of a DRC1A. However, on October 15th, 2019, through notification, they amended the rules. They amended Rule 142 saying that the word shall be replaced by may. So now it is the choice of the officer to issue a DRC1A. However, in all practicality, I believe almost all state authorities are going upfront and issuing the DRC1A as giving a window of opportunity to the taxpayer to come up front and conclude the proceedings with the least possible penalties under 74 if allowed. So they don't want unnecessary penalties. So they are ultimately giving you a chance to come clean. So even though it is optional to the taxpayer to the officer, they are still issuing DRC1A prior to the DRC1 and the shock cause notice. We can take this DRC1A as the spiritual successor of the pre-shock cause notice consultation, which was a mandatory requirement in the earlier central excise and service tax regimes. So use the DRC1A opportunity well. And if you have any liability that you have to clear off, clear it at the stage of DRC1A itself. File the Part B manually along with all your other contentions regarding why the demand is sustainable or not. Then you can move on to the next stage. Now, once this DRC1A story is over, let us now the shock cause notice comes. The important point that we have to think in 74 and 73 is the time limit for issuance of that notice. Now, while studying 73 and 74, you have the acts in front of you, those who have it with you. Please note that the three forms of words which will sound similar but are very different in law are as follows. One is issue, second is serve, third is communicate. All three are different. So there are instances in 73 and 74 which uses the term the proper officer shall issue the notice. There are instances in 73 and 74 where it talks about the notice being served, the order is being served, etc. And there is an instance in 74 which talks about the order being communicated. So don't take all these three words as the same meaning, because the time limits, especially under 74, to do something on your part will depend on the time from either issue or service or communication, and even 1 day delay will result in a 15% or 50% jump in penalty if it is a proceeding under 74. So the primary focus should be on which word we are using in that section. So when we are talking about issuance of notice, think of it as issuance by the officer and not the date on which you are getting the notice. We will stop here and we will go to section 169. Everybody is more or less aware of 169, but still for those who have not yet read it, please read 169 and 161. We will go through the process of assessments, but fail to identify the powers the government has already kept in 169 regarding the manner of service of the notice or the order. 169 gives the proper officer multiple ways in which the notice is treated as issued and served. It can be manual, it can be through registered mail, it can be through electronic mail, it can be through service in the common portal, it can be issued, tendered directly to you, your staff, your tax practitioner, to your chartered accountant, to your advocate, or if none of the above, you can circulate into the local advertisement, or you can even post it into the address. Now, 169 is very, very relevant as far as a tax professional is concerned. Why? Because if you are the authorized GSTP, service to you is equivalent to service to the taxpayer. And it specifically states that whichever mail was used at the time of registration and amended from time to time, if a notice is served there, it shall be deemed to have been properly served. So a lot of you would have taken registrations for a small number of clients, a large number of clients, some of whom may not be very tech savvy, and they might have given you an email ID. So all those email IDs, you have to be very vigilant. You have to look into it and check whether there are any notices given in there, because any notice given in your email ID is a valid service of notice. Our Kerala High Court has already clarified in the case of PB Enterprises as well as some other cases that any notice served under section 169C and D is a valid service of notice, and you have to take that date as a date on which the notice was properly served. So be aware of 169 when we go through the provisions of 73 and 74 when it comes to date of service of notice. Now, when it's the officer has to first issue the notice, he shall issue the notice in case it is a notice under 73 3 months prior to the last date for which the order has to be completed. So 73.2 you have to read with 73.10, which says that the last date for passing an order, issuing and completing an order is 3 years from the annual return due date. That is, for 17-18, we know that the annual return due date was February 7th, 2020. So 3 years from that is February 7th, 2023. So 3 months prior to February 7th, 2023, he has to issue the notice under 73. If not, then even if there was time for the completion of the assessment order, the shock cause note itself is invalid and the order will be vitiated. So both the time limits, the issuance of the order, the notice as well as the completion of the order, both time limits, 73.2 is as important as 73.10. Now, in parallel, in 74, we have 74.2 read with 74.10, which says that if you are alleging fraud, willful misstatement or suppression, the time limit is much higher. You have 5 years from the end of the annual return date, and the notice shall be issued 6 months prior to that date. So at present, we are in 2021. The officer has still a long time to go. We won't be focusing much on 73.2 and 73.10 or 74.2 and 74.10. But in those periods, in 2023 and 24, mark my words, you will be looking into each day whether the officer has correctly issued the officer on that specific day. If 1 day delay will win the case for you. So that is the importance of getting those notices served in time for the proper officer. You also have to be very well be thorough on the fact that this is the date on which the officer should have issued the notice, where he should have served it, what are the methodologies he could have used to serve it, and what is the date of completing the order. Now, if it is a case of no fraud, willful misstatement, etc., and you are accepting the liability, you need to pay the tax as well as the interest under section 50 and communicate it to the officer, and the proceedings are closed then and there. However, if there is a shock cause notice under 73 or DRC 1 issued to you, and there is a liability on you, one additional section is triggered. That is 73.9, invocation of penalty. Even bona fide persons who have mistakenly paid a tax will be liable to pay 73.9 penalty if there is an actual difference in tax liability the officer has identified in his notice. The penalty under 73.9 will be 10% or 10,000, whichever is higher. There is one additional penalty under 73, which is 73.11. The clarification for 73.11 has been given by the CBIC in circular number 76/2019, which states that once a proceeding under 73 is started, that is a shock cause notice plus DRC 1 is served on you, and you are a case where self-assessed tax or the tax collected has been kept by you and not paid to the government's kitty within 30 days from the due date on which you should have paid it, irrespective of the fact that you have paid the entire tax with interest in full after the issuance of notice, there will be a mandatory penalty of 10%. 10% of the tax liability shall be So 73.9 after 30 days will apply to you. Before 30 days, if you close it, just tax and interest. After 30 days, 10,000 or 10%. But even if it is prior to 30 days, this 7311 penalty will come and hit you. So the only way out for a very honest assessee to escape without penalty under 73 is to pay the tax within 30 days and close it altogether. And it also has to be a case where there is no delay of more than 30 days under section 7311. After the 30th day time limit, either 73.9 will hit you, or if you have collected for 30 days in the underlying case and had, 7311 will come and hit you. Now, look back to 74. Prior to the issuance of the show cause notice and DRC1, that is at the stage of intimation by the proper officer in DRC 1A under 74, or you yourself admitted as part of a inquiry or any other proceedings, you can pay the tax, interest and 15% penalty. Now, if it is paid tax, interest and 15% penalty, the officer need not issue a show cause notice, issue order and complete the case. The proceedings are deemed to be completed. But if you don't do it and your reply is not satisfactory, the officer will go ahead and issue a notice, show cause notice under 74 with equal penalty. And if you pay within 30 days of issue of notice, you can conclude the proceedings again. Another chance is given to you by paying 25% of the penalty. 1 day delay after that, again 25% will jump, and you'll have to wait till the adjudication is complete and the order is done. Now, once it is adjudicated and the order is against you, even after then, the government is giving you a chance. You pay the tax with 50% of the penalty and the full interest thereon, and the proceedings are concluded again. You need not pay the full 74 penalty. And once the 30-day time is over from the order date, the date on which it is communicated to you, then there will not be a requirement for a reduction for you because you are contesting it, or you are a person who does not obey the law. The entire 74 will be hit on you. So those are the things that we have to be very worried about in 74. 74 gradually increases in terms of penalty. 74.5 talks about 15, 74.8 talks about 25, 74.11 will have a 50% give you. And once these time periods are over, the penalty will be full 74, that is equal to the tax amount involved in that show cause notice will be the liability on your head. Now, there are certain general principles in section 75. One of the beautiful sections which we have in our Act is 75, which have brought the spirit of many earlier judgments, settled provisions as part of the law itself. I'll highlight some interesting provisions in 75, which is very relevant for our discussion today. One is that the officer has to give adjournment. The Act recognizes that for valid reasons, you are entitled to 3 adjournments. Please make use of it. While preparing your reply, if you have details to get, please submit that these are the allegations raised before me. I want to get so and so details. I could not do so for so and so reasons. I request an adjournment. So like that, you have 3 opportunities, especially in these COVID times, where generally there are lockdowns in place and there is general delay in getting documentation relating to any part period. It is a genuine ground which you can submit to the officer and obtain a adjournment for 3 times, which the officer cannot deny, because if it is a genuine ground, he has to entertain it in writing. So use that adjournment and ensure that you won't end up in an ex parte order. Now, point number 2 in 75, which I need to highlight, is the order should be a speaking order. The order needs to arrive at the liability being quantified by proper reasoning, which should be forming part of the order, and should not be a simple statement that this is the amount involved and this is the tax liability and equivalent interest and applicable penalty. It has to reason why this tax is liable to be paid by you and why your reply cannot be considered or it is not meritorious. That has to be a speaking order. So if it is not a speaking order, you can directly go to court saying that the provisions are being violated and there is a violation principles of PNJ. Now, very interesting point of view, which we'll have to look into each notice and order we are going to see, is that the assessment order cannot go beyond the show cause notice. Not even 1 rupee. So the quantification that has come under the show cause notice is already present. The order cannot go beyond the quantification given in that show cause notice. Also, the order cannot be confirmed on any other grounds other than the grounds alleged against you in that show cause notice. So while framing an appeal or while looking into an assessment order, we have to check whether the adjudicating authority has properly given his reasoning and arrived at a speaking order, has already quantified the tax, and such quantification is not in excess of the original tax liability quantified in the show cause notice, and the grounds on which he has not agreed or not agreed to a reply or arrived at the tax liability are the grounds which are forming part of the show cause notice. So very important in terms of any further appeals, etc., that we keep these provisions in mind. Then we have two very simple points, 7512 and 7513. One is being amended. It is yet to be notified that there can be a direct recovery. That is 7512. If you have a self-assessed tax, the tax as well as the interest on that self-assessed tax, which can also post amendment in 2021 once it is notified to mean the higher tax that you have self-declared in your GSTR1 for which you have not included in GSTR3B, be directly recovered without going to the motion of a show cause notice and order. It is yet to be, the amendment is yet to be notified, and if that is the case, they can directly go into RR. So 7512 was a question when the officers generally used to use a RR mechanism to recover interest on GSTR 3B on gross basis. Thankfully, many courts, including Jharkhand High Court in the case of Mahadev Constructions, went against it and said, you cannot do RR, you have to first give a notice, adjudicate, and then only do it. So the government is hell-bent on getting their taxes, even if you have declared it in GSTR 1 and not filed in 3B. So they amended the provisions and it will be notified in very shortly. Now 7513, very important section. It encapsulates the principle of double jeopardy. 7513 says that wherever there is a penalty leviable under 73 and 74, no penalty for the same act or offense can be initiated under any other provisions of the act. Now, this I believe will be a very good provision which will save us from dual penalties for the same offense under 122, because if you have suppressed a turnover which will result in a tax liability, the provisions of penalty are present in 122. For the same offense, you will be liable to penalty under 74. So you need not be paying penalty under both 74 and 122. But personal opinion, I would like the legislature to add an explanation to 7513 stating that series of transactions which result into the tax liability should be viewed as one event. Because in amended 76 and 78 of Finance Act 2000, Finance Act 1994 in relating to service tax, our Kerala High Court had a decision in the case of Krishna Bodwal in the context of 76 and 78, which says that in the context of service tax, 76 penalty for short payment of tax and 78 penalty for was suppressing the turnover. And it does not matter that the short payment was as a result of that suppression. So even in one transaction, it can be divided into two limbs, and there are penalties that can be sustainable for both. So if that is the way the department again interprets 74 and 122, we will be in a soup. So I would like the legislature, if possible, I believe they will do it, if they can clarify through a circular, or they can insert an explanation stating that multiple offenses which are part of an integral transaction which ultimately leads into a short payment of tax, it need not be viewed as a separate offense. It's the same act or offense, which is the exact word used in 7513, should be understood in spirit and not letter. And any provisions for 122 and 74 should not be both applied on the SSC. So that is one saving clause we can expect from the government. I hope that there will be clarity on that in the days to come, because penal provisions are something we are expecting a lot of litigation. Now, we know that all these notices are supposed to be served in any of the methods under 169, as well as a summary form in DRC 07. The ultimate order will always be in a summary form in DRC 7. Now, DRC 7, as per Rule 122, is also having another purpose. DRC 7 is nothing but the notice for recovery also. It is an order for quantifying the tax summary order under 74 or 73 or any of the other demands under 129, 130, all those. It has a common form, 62 also. But this is also going to be the same notice for recovery, and the proper officer can use this DRC 7 if you don't get it stayed after 3 months for invocation of any of the methodologies covered under 79 to get that revenue from you. So be aware, whenever you see a DRC 7 which is open against your assessee or your client, be aware that there is a demand against you, assessment is happening against you, and you need to take appropriate steps to get it stayed, usually by filing an appeal under 107 and paying the pre-deposit and filing the appeals, or moving the court in case there is a merit other than statutory remedy. You need to challenge the order per se, you can directly move the court. So those are the general things we have as tax practitioners. We need to be aware in relating to the various methods of assessment methodologies, the notices, and the general demand that can come from the department to you. So it is already 7 o'clock. I wanted to finish a bit earlier, but I am opening the floor up for any queries or discussions on 61, 62, 63, 73, or 74, or any other connected topics for which we'll have a discussion. Thank you, sir.
Any, do you have noted any questions?
I saw a question in the chat box. If DIN is not entered in the notice and reason for the same is not explained, what will be the fate of the notice and related orders? Okay, a very good question that has been raised by Mr. Anirudhan. Now, DIN has been mandate given by Circular 128 by CBIC for all forms of communication. Initially, it used to be only for specified communication as per Circular 122, but afterwards they got amended to all forms of communication, which he has to quote, generate online DIN and quote it in the notice. Now, there are certain exceptional scenarios where, as per the circular itself, there is no requirement for a DIN. Examples are those notices or orders which are generated as part of an inspection for which they have a 15-day further period to verify, correct it, and issuance of a post notice DIN. The officer can do it. Other than those cases, any notices which are not having a DIN is a illegal notice per se, which has already been clarified by the Finance Minister, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman. From Kerala State GST point of view, they have issued circular number 8/2020, which is more or less in line with circular 122. Only the problem is that it has yet to bring in the amendment regarding circular 128 of CBIC, that Kerala still uses the word specified communication and not all notices and orders. However, I would like to add, there is a one case before the Kerala High Court Division Bench in the case of Kerala Vision and the local cable operators, where there was an inspection happening, and the Kerala High Court was asked whether non-availability of DIN in the show cause notice can vitiate the notice and the order. So the court in that judgment said that all the things other than the DIN is being valid, and we are giving the department additional time for correcting this simple clerical thing. And if they correct it within that time, the court will accept that as a proper notice. So even if you challenge it on that ground, be aware that our courts are very protective of the government, and they may take a stance that it is a corrective thing and they can correct it. Generally, it needs to be enforced, but there are instances where courts have also entertained notices where there are no DINs, and asking the department to cure it subsequently, after which they consider it as a valid notice and a valid order.
Sir, another question. If school education provided to disabled students and collecting fees under trust registration,
Okay.
is liable to take registration?
If it is a taxable activity and it is not exempted under 12/2017, and this threshold of 20 lakhs has crossed, he'll become a taxable person. He has to take registration. Whether or not he's eligible for the exemption is an altogether different question. There is a exemption for education sector, up to pre-KG, up to this higher school, approved curriculum as recognized, or any that skill training institution, those cases. And such assents are exempted. If it is fully exempted, the provisions of section 23 will come and you need not take registration if your threshold is closed. Whether that assessee is doing an exempted activity is a question of fact, and you need to actually look into the kind of services you are providing. Mr. Pankaj sir has asked a question. If section 74 notice is issued by the department instead of 61 on the basis of scrutiny. Yeah, there is no problem as far as the government is concerned in issuing 74 directly. Because first, and in my opinion, 61 is a choice of the proper officer. He can scrutinize a return if he wants. There is no mandate. Look at the council minutes on 61. The usage of may was insisted upon by the legislature while framing the Model Act. There was an initial thought that every return needs to be mandatory scrutinized, which they purposefully avoided by the usage of may. So 61 is totally a choice. Now, issuance of 74 notice. So 74 notice an issue. If they're asking DRC1 at the stage of notice itself, the first stage itself is 74, show cause notice plus DRC1, aggressive stance. I can say that by non-issuance of DRC1A, even though the rule now is making the choice, a discretion to the department officer, that you have an option to give DRC1A, it is only an option and not mandatory. You can proceed with DRC1. I can say aggressive stand that once they have directly issued show cause notice plus DRC1, I have lost the opportunity for getting the DRC1A, by which I could have used a lower penalty of DRC1, 15%, and I am now prejudiced. So I can try approach getting the court to say that this notice may be treated as a DRC1A, and I need to get an opportunity to pay that tax and close it under 15% penalty. If at all there is a mens rea involved and it is a case for 74. So direct going to 74 notice, show cause notice instead of a DRC1A, in personal opinion, I believe that there is prejudice to the assessee being caused. Some court needs to explore this position.
KK Tangachan asking, sir, can you please explain section 107 6A?
107 6A. Let me check the act. I think it has something to do with appeals.
Yeah. Says.
Yeah.
No appeal shall be filed.
No appeal shall be filed if the okay. Now let us assume that you have a show cause notice. You have filed a reply stating so and so reasons that this amount is taxable, this is not taxable, this your contention is wrong. Now the officer reads your reply and says that this is the assessment order. Now, in assuming that out of a tax liability of 1 lakh, you have accepted that there is a liability of 50,000 and the other 50,000 is wrong, which you are disputing. And the officer issues, but you still have not paid it with interest and penalty, or if applicable in full. You have to pay interest as well as penalty and close under 74, or if it is under 73, you are saying it is under 73, tax plus interest to get it closed. Otherwise, he will issue the order stating that 50,000 has already been accepted to you, 50,000, I believe it is liable to be paid, which you are contesting. So in this case, 50,000 rupees is accepted by you also. You don't have a challenge to it. You accept it, but you have not paid with interest in full. And the other 50,000, you feel it is not payable at all. So if you want to file an appeal against this order, you have to file the pre-deposit as for getting this stay. You have to file not only the 10% of the disputed 50,000, but the entire 50,000 that is liable, which you have accepted as being payable. So you have to challenge the entire demand in full if you want to pay 10,000, 10% of the gross, and you have to get the appeal. So for 1 lakh, you can say you are challenging everything, and you can pay 10,000 and appeal in full, or you will have to pay 50,000 plus 10%, 5,000, 55,000 to get that appeal admitted. So if you are not challenging the entire demand, then you will have to pay up a higher amount as 107.6 amount to get that appeal admitted.
Sir, Advocate Dawal Patwa asking, is there any time limit to issue order in assessment ASMT 12?
There is no time limit in the act. The act is silent on the issuance of an ASMT 12. But let us connect 61 with the 73 or 74. Now, if you connect 61 with 73 and 74 and look it from the government's angle, let us assume that government wants to recover something from you. it has to act within the ultimate time period of 3 years or 5 years and the 3 months or 6 months show cause notice prior to that. So till that time, they have time to issue show cause notice or DRC 1A as the case may be. So any time up till then, they are free to issue or non-issue ASMT 12. That is their choice. But generally, if you ask me, it has to be done in a reasonable time. Please furnish judgment details in relation to notice of want of due. I believe that this is actually a fair, it's a decision per incurium, but Anirudhan sir, go through the decision of Kerala High Court in the case of Kerala Vision TV. That is a appellant, sorry, the litigant.
Another question from Balakrishnan. Ordinary notices, additional notices, and orders. What is the difference in portal?
Yeah, we know that this is one of the major problems on how tax environment is presently working in. There are two tabs, view notices tab and view additional notices tabs. Frankly, in my opinion, it is redundant. There needs to be only view notices tab. But since this entire framework was created by Infosys, they have their own reasoning as to why they require two tabs, and that too hidden somewhere. Only 2 weeks ago, it came up front. Many of us who were actually in receipt of notices never even knew that notices were being served in the common portal, which was one of the main problems of the design of the common portal. But frankly, there need not be any bifurcation between view notices and view additional notices. Legally, there is no difference. But from technological point of view, as per GSTN, certain notices are automatically linked to the view notices tab and certain notices are linked to the view additional notices tab. Legally, there is no difference. Either service in notices tab or additional tab is irrelevant for the purpose of section 169. Either of the two will be treated as service under 169 and will be treated as properly served.
One more question is there, but it is already explained by you. The authorities always invoke section 74 instead of section 73. What is the remedy, sir? This is already explained.
Okay, this is actually a major issue that, the answer to this is simple. Old habits die hard. This is something that the revenue has been having a habit of taking from the earlier periods itself. They always want to invoke fraud, willful misstatement, etc. So since they are alleging that there is a case for fraud, it is settled provision of law that the allegation being done by the officer, he has to prove that there has been willful misstatement or suppression or misrepresentation to evade a tax. So they can allege whatever they want, but the onus is also on them to prove. All we need to prove that we have duly done everything as the government intends us to do in good faith and there was no mens rea involved. That is for us to defend. Now, one additional thing that they have introduced in 74 to make their lives easier is the explanation 2 to section 74, which says that there is a definition for suppression. Suppression shall mean non-declaration of fact in a return. We know that the number of returns and the complexity of the related fields in the returns are so high that invariably we will miss something in the annual return or the monthly 3B, which might be somewhere related to some shortfall in tax. They will use this connection as that. This is the reason why there is mens rea. So the core idea behind insertion of an explanation to define suppression is to make their life easier. But even then, I will say that just because I have missed out something automatically does not mean that I have suppressed with intent to evade. I have suppressed, but there is no intended to evade. So that is always on us to prove that we are a good and honest taxpayer. And frankly, I will not agree. I'm a pro-tax guy. I do not agree that everybody is issuing 74 notices. Kerala state government, I think every notice after ASMT 10, which we are facing now, is under 73. Okay, we have to give merit whenever there is merit. SGST department has identified fraud cases and non-fraud cases in very rational, fair means. Kerala, our lives, even though we are facing n number of notices, it's all under 73.
One more question is that, sir, 2017-18, officer issued DRC 1A. Exceeded time limit, claimed ITC. Any scope of appeal in this matter?
Okay. ERC 1A stage, you can do whatever you want. You can choose to comply, pay as per the department's view. You can choose to litigate. They will issue notice again. They will issue order. You will have to fight in appeal. All that will go. But I believe the case you are going for is whether 16.4 demand will ultimately be in favor of the SSE or not. I would say, yes, I think for 17-18, there's a good chance that we can win it. But this will happen only if the person sitting here also participate in getting a representation through the council, at least for the first financial year, give us a break and give us 16.4 relief, especially since 3B was retrospectively inserted as a return under 39 for the first year. So from 18-19 onwards, I don't think that we need to ask for a break for 16.4 liabilities. But first year, if the AFPT as well as the other major organizations involved in propagating GST to the masses, I believe that we have a good ground to fight on 16.4 for the first year.
Mr. Ravi Koti asking, what is the meaning of desk visit, sir?
Desk visit is, no, I don't think it is desk visit, it's desk review. Generally, there are audits being done by the department under section 65. Now, in audits, generally what happens is there is a audit department. Audit has its own audit teams. Audit teams have two functions: to verify the books and accounts which have been maintained under section 35 by the authorities, by the taxpayers, to determine the correct liability and whether the returns are appropriate, and also to actually go physically to the office or to the client's place to ensure that what actually is happening is actually being presented in the books of accounts and the returns. Only filing the returns and the book matching the books is altogether different story from actual visit to the client SSE premises. Now, in desk review, what they do is they actually take all the documents relating to the auditee being audited, and they will fill up all the data, and they'll primarily identify major things that the audit risk parameters have identified as need being verified. So the CBIC has issued a detailed booklet on the method of conducting an audit. So it is available in CBIC portal. That is the PDF document, audit under GST Act. Go through that booklet and they will have a huge information database of how the officer are supposed to conduct a desk review and how they are supposed to do a audit and the documentation requirements for that audit. So that will be the things that they are going to fall under desk review.
When Mr. Jayarajan raised his hand,